Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, March the 28th, 2025. In this video, I want to have a quick look at the horoscope of the United States and of Trump with a particular reference to this signal leak. So this was a conversation about the attack on the Houthis in Yemen, and it was all done on Signal, and there was the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic was accidentally in on this conversation, and he revealed it all, and it's a bit of a scandal. I'm not quite sure how much of a big deal it is, but certainly Trump's enemies are trying to make the most of it. But yeah, I thought I'd have a quick look at it. I'm not saying that I'm going to come up with anything particularly dramatic. But before I do that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Friday, March the 28th, 2025. If you happen to enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would be very happy to have you as a subscriber. So here is the picture for today. There is Donald Trump, US flag, and that is apparently the symbol of Signal, which is causing all the trouble for the Trump administration. So at noon today, the moon is still in Pisces. That's noon New York time, and the moon is actually making quite a lot of aspects in late Pisces, because the moon makes a trine to Mars, makes a conjunction to Saturn, sextile to Uranus, conjunct Venus, conjunct Neptune. You can see that moon conjunct Venus and Neptune. So although the Venus-Neptune conjunction was yesterday, it really comes into focus today because of the moon getting involved. In fact, we've got not just the moon, we've got the node as well. So there's a real blast of Pisces today, and you know, with the moon making that conjunction to Venus, it's a rather difficult aspect to sort of pin down. You know, on one hand, it's quite a pleasant aspect. I mean, you know, moon conjunct Venus is nice. I mean, especially as Venus is in its exaltation, and with moon conjunct Venus, it's quite a sensitive aspect, and we can be sensitive to other people's needs, and there is quite an emphasis on emotion, though it is tied up with skeet, and like yesterday, there is a feeling that there can be too much emotion. And also we have to remember that skeet is associated with water and water damage, shipping disasters. So whatever we're doing, we mustn't take risks with water. And you know, when it comes to water, we must always assume that things might go wrong. Additionally, you know, we've got moon conjunct Saturn, and there's a bit of a contradiction there. You know, moon is making the conjunction to Saturn, and then moon moves on and makes the conjunction with Venus and Neptune. So probably at first with that moon conjunct Saturn, we do feel that we are having to hold back on something, at least to begin with, and then we find a way of expressing ourselves. I don't think that moon conjunct Saturn is going to define today, but it's just something that does have to be considered. Now, the moon does change sign. It changes sign, moves into Aries at 20:36. That's a 24-hour clock, so that's 8:36 p.m. London time. So if you are in New York, the moon will move into Aries at let's get this right, at 1:36. No, that's not right. It is going to be at 4:36 p.m. the moon will move into Aries, and so that will be 1:36 p.m. if you're on the West Coast, if you're in California. So in the Americas, for most of the day, the moon is moving through Pisces, but then there is that sign change over the course of the afternoon. And if you're in Europe, the UK, then Africa, then this evening the moon will move into Aries, and you might see a change of emphasis. That's one planet moving out of Pisces, the moon making a conjunction to Mercury. So the last part of the day may be a little more active and dynamic than the first part. And that's the picture for New York, if we set the chart for New York. And if we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, at noon, the moon is at 17 Pisces. So if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon does not move into Aries today. And probably the main aspect is a conjunction between the moon and Saturn. So when I talked about New York, I'd rather de-emphasize that conjunction. But if you are in Australia and New Zealand, you may really feel it. You could argue that it's one of the main aspects of the day. So yes, in Australia and New Zealand, there is a lot of emotion flying around, but there are also big attempts to keep it under wraps. So not everyone is going to be prepared to express their feelings, and there may be then a certain sense of tension over the course of the day. Though, tomorrow the moon will be in Aries, and then there is the heliocentric picture. So this is the positions of the planets from the viewpoint of the Sun, with the Sun in the middle of the solar system, and the conjunction between Earth, Venus, and Mercury is certainly starting to break up in quite a big way, but still the Earth and Venus are relatively close to one another. And also it seems that Venus is making a sesquiquadrate to Uranus. So we've got Venus sesquiquadrate Uranus. So when I talked about the Earth-Venus conjunction in previous days, I was suggesting it was quite a pleasant thing, and we try to get on with each other. But now with Venus making a sesquiquadrate to Uranus, that might indicate that certain relationships may be under a little bit of pressure, and we can see the differences between us. And because this is a heliocentric chart, we maybe have to take a more collective view, and it may be about the relationships between nations and foreign policy. So Venus, on a personal level, is about how we get on with each other. On a collective level, it's about how countries get on and how they cooperate. And so Venus sesquiquadrate Uranus might make things a little more difficult than usual. So those are a few thoughts on the heliocentric picture. And now I want to look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, March the 28th, 2025. Aries. Aries, it may be a day of two parts. At the beginning of the day, the moon is moving through Pisces. In fact, it might be all day if you're in Australia or New Zealand. And, with the moon moving through Pisces, you are feeling that you have got a lot to offer, but the question is now the right time? You may be feeling that things are more complicated than you'd like them to be, that if you were to be yourself, you'd be concerned about what kind of reaction you'd get. And you're aware that other people have strong feelings. And, when people have got strong feelings, that makes you feel that you just have to be more careful than usual, that you can't just barge in that normal Aries way. So if there's something you want to do, but you're not entirely happy about it, it's probably best to trust your instincts and to just wait. Though at some stage in the day, the moon does move into Aries. Okay, it might not be until tomorrow if you're in Australia and New Zealand, but this afternoon in the Americas, the moon is moving into Aries, your sign, and that does create a big change. You suddenly find that you're ready. You're ready to make things happen. And the moon in Aries makes a conjunction to Mercury. Mercury might be retrograde, but still in your sign. And so if there's anything important that you want to say, then maybe you should wait until this afternoon, when, if you like, the stars align and you can be forthright, definite, and very clear about what you want, and clear also about what is important to you. And a lot of things are important to you. Mars continues to be square Chiron, and that aspect between Mars and Chiron, has been around for some time, and I have commented on it quite a lot, but it does indicate to me that you have a particular view, and you haven't been always sure how you can express it, and how you can express what makes you different from everyone else. But with the moon moving into Aries, it comes together. So this afternoon, Aries, if you're an American Aries, you start to find the right way of dealing with things and the right way to assert yourself. And if you're in Europe, well, I don't know what you're doing this evening, but it might be a good idea to be alert this evening and awake, and you might then find that there's something you can do which has an impact. Even if no one else is involved, you can work on something in your own way this evening if you're a European, if you're a European Aries, and more so if you're an American Aries as well. So if you're in Europe and America, this evening can be very productive, and you can get things done. And if you have the opportunity, you can be very dynamic. Turning to relationships, yesterday we had a conjunction between Venus and Neptune. Today the moon is making a conjunction to Venus and Neptune, and that may say something about some of the people who are important to you. They remain quite sensitive, and also they should be respected. They're sensitive, not necessarily in a bad way. They can feel things that you can't, and they possibly have observations to make that you could benefit from, emotional observations. And it is important, when you're dealing with partners and other people who are important, who really matter to you, that you're able to appreciate them and understand that they want things to happen at a particular pace, and that may be a slower pace than you would like. And it's just a question of showing some sympathy and respect. And if you can do that, relationships should be fine. Just remember that other people are not going as quickly as you are. And that's especially the case once moon goes into Aries. Now, that would be this afternoon if you're in the Americas, or this evening if you're in Europe or Africa. Taurus, Venus is conjunct Neptune. It was conjunct Neptune yesterday, but I think in some respects that conjunction between Venus and Neptune is more prominent today because of the involvement of the moon. So the moon is moving through late Pisces, and so the moon in late Pisces makes a conjunction to Venus and Neptune, so it brings everything together. And this makes you very sensitive and fine-tuned. You can pick up all sorts of things, and actually you won't be so typically Taurean. One of the problems that Taureans can have is that they can be rather unsubtle. They don't notice the nuances. They just they just feel that they can be blunt. They say things as they are, and that can sometimes be a problem. But at the moment, with the moon making a conjunction to Venus, Venus making a conjunction to Neptune, you have an increased level of subtlety and sensitivity, and on an emotional level, you are more aware than usual. And you can pick up on other people's feelings, and you're not going to upset anyone, I don't think, because you'll know what to say and what not to say. So that kind of puts you in a good position, because you can navigate your social world, and if you are meeting people today, you'll know exactly how to behave, and your sensitivity could make you new friends, and at the very least, people are going to appreciate you. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you are just going to follow the crowd and you're going to be a nice person and you're going to be a responsible part of the scenery. Inside, you are feeling a little bit restless. You feel that something needs to change. You know that now is not quite the right time for change, but you feel it. And ideally, you would like to do something dramatic. And the question is, are you going to be able to? The answer may be no. And you might have to wait, or else do something dramatic, in your own way, at your own pace, or else find some kindred spirits. Ideally, Taurus, you would find people today who are on your wavelength, who have the same kind of frustrations as you. And together you can really make things happen. And so, Taurus, in a way, you're very good at understanding the collective vibe. And you're not going to do anything stupid. You're not going to make a fool of yourself. But if you are with dynamic people, you can make dynamic things happen, because you will know that it is the right time, and you're going to be helped by a trine aspect between the Moon and Mars. So that Moon and Mars does mean that, if appropriate, you can come up with a plan of action helped by other people. So if possible, Taurus, you would make some effort to choose your company, because ideally you want an environment where everyone can get together and create the necessary changes. So if possible, Taurus, try to keep moving. Don't be stuck in one place. And some people just want to do nothing, and you will respect that. But other people really are in the mood for action. Now, at some stage today, the moon does change signs. That will be this evening if you're in Europe. It will be this afternoon if you're in the Americas. And when the moon changes sign and moves into Aries, you're still pretty sensitive in a good way. But with the moon changing sign, moon moving into Aries, you may want to slow down a little. And so there's some danger, Taurus, that you lose your moment. So if you're in the Americas, for example, ideally, if you've got something important to do, you should do it this morning or early afternoon. If you're in Europe or Africa, then it's not such a big deal, because by the time the moon moves into Aries, it's the evening anyway, and you've done whatever you want to do. And of course, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon doesn't move into Aries until tomorrow, so you don't have to worry about it. Gemini, there is a lot of stuff going on in Pisces, and we've got the moon in Pisces. So we've got Moon, Saturn, Venus, Neptune, and the North Node here. And the moon doesn't stay in Pisces forever. The moon will at some stage move into Aries. But while the moon is in Pisces, it would be a good idea to get things done, make things happen, be as dynamic as possible. People will pay attention to you, and it'll be quite clear that you have something to offer. And if need be, Gemini, you can be something of a leader, and it's because you just have a feeling that there are things that need to be done, and you're not going to be shy about it. And additionally, you can be fairly tough if you want to be, tougher than usual. The moon is making a conjunction to Saturn today, and that moon conjunct Saturn is going to give you a strong sense of yourself, a strong sense of purpose, and also a strong sense of discipline. It's true that the moon does make a conjunction to Neptune in the end, but I somehow feel that in your case, the moon, that conjunction between the moon and Saturn is going to be the important aspect. Even if you're in the Americas, that moon-Saturn conjunction, especially strong if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But yeah, even in the Americas, that Saturn influence is going to be powerful. So Gemini, if there's something you feel that needs to be done, then make sure it happens, and don't be shy, and don't be afraid of establishing your authority. It's okay, people won't mind. Sometimes people need leadership, and leadership is certainly something that at the moment you can provide. Now, the moon does change sign, and it moves into Aries. That will be this afternoon if you're in the Americas. That would be this evening if you're in Europe or Africa. Tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. And with this sign change, you possibly become a little more relaxed. And that's with moon moving into Aries. You don't normally associate moon moving out of Pisces and into Aries as being more relaxed. But I think in your case, yes, you're not quite so focused on a single goal, and you're looking for other possibilities, and you're going to be possibly easier to get on with, because the moon, when it moves into Aries, it makes a conjunction to Mercury. And so moon conjunct Mercury allows you to be yourself. It allows you to communicate in a way that is dynamic, but I don't think is too authoritative. You lose some of that authoritative touch when the moon moves into Aries, but I think that might be a good thing. I think that you'll just be, in general, an easier and more relaxing person to deal with, and hopefully by the time the moon moves into Aries, you will have achieved whatever you need to achieve. And of course, it's Friday, it's the end of a working week, so that's kind of appropriate that the moon moves into Aries as you move into the weekend. Cancer, there is a fair amount going on today. So you may find yourself being busier than usual, and you may feel a sense that it's your job to make things happen, and even if you don't want to make things happen, you can just get carried along with it, and you move from one thing to another thing, and there's always something that needs your attention. And I think that in general this is a good thing, and if you have the choice, it's important that you do stuff which is mind expanding, which allows you to see the world in a new way. You've got a lot of the answers, but you haven't got all the answers, and it is a day when you can have new experiences, even things which you had done before, a million times before even. There will be a new slant, a new way of doing something, and it is therefore important that you are open-minded and that you're not judgmental. I mean, you could be judgmental, especially at the beginning of the day, especially if you're in Australia or New Zealand, because that's when you've got the moon conjunct Saturn, and with the moon conjunct Saturn, you might want to run a tight ship, and you might not want too much variety. You might feel that there's got to be only one way of doing it, the best way of doing it, and you might be dismissive of other alternatives. But I think that would be a bad approach. You have to sort of look at this moon Saturn conjunction as an opportunity to get things together, but also maintaining your open-mindedness. The moon Saturn conjunction might also have something to do with relationships, and with that moon Saturn conjunction, you might find that in the right circumstances, you can benefit from another person's knowledge and experience. And it might not always be what you want to hear, but again, if you are open-minded, you might just recognize that someone else has got a different and perhaps superior approach which you can benefit from. And this person might be someone you know very well. You might share the same living space with them, and you can have a new respect for them if you give them a chance. But the moon Saturn conjunction is not the only thing going on, and with the moon moving through Pisces, just be as sensitive and as open-minded as possible. And the moon makes a conjunction to Venus and a conjunction to Neptune, and that conjunction involving Moon, Venus, and Neptune is sensitive. It allows you to tune into things. You can tune into other people's feelings, the world around you, and you can actually be super sensitive and maybe a little bit psychic. If you have psychic abilities, then I think that Moon-Neptune conjunction, Moon-Venus-Neptune conjunction, is certainly going to help you to fine-tune them, and being able to pick up on people's thoughts and feelings is something you're just going to do really well. And if you really do feel that someone is thinking something, then you're probably right, and you can use your sensitivity to help you find security, find the right place. And if someone is not trustworthy or is trying to pull the wool over your eyes, I think you'll know about it pretty quickly. Now, the moon does change sign today. Okay, it might be tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but this afternoon the moon moves into Aries. This evening, this afternoon the moon moves into Aries if you're in the Americas. If you are in Europe or Africa, then it won't be until this evening. But when the moon moves into Aries, that does create a change of pace, and it's a kind of strange change of pace, given that it's a Friday, the end of the working week. It might be the end of the working week for everyone else, but not necessarily for you, at least on a psychological level, because with the moon moving into Aries, that is going to make you more dynamic in some respects and more ambitious. And so as you move into the weekend, you may be thinking about all the stuff you want to achieve, and you might even be in a bit of a hurry to get it all done. So if you have a job, or you're running a business, or you just want to make things happen, then the weekend could be quite busy, or at least you're going to want it to be busy. But I'll talk about the moon in Aries and what it means for the weekend when I do your horoscope tomorrow, when I look at Saturday and Sunday and how it's going to impact you. But yeah, as you consider the weekend, don't plan on having a completely relaxing time, because you might be of a view that there really are things that need to be done. Leo, it's a bit of a changeover day. There has been a lot of stuff in Pisces. There's still a lot of stuff in Pisces, and with all of this stuff in Pisces, the emphasis is on your feelings and the way you feel about the world and the way you feel about yourself. And Leo in itself is not an especially emotional sign, but right now you may be more emotional than usual, and emotional factors may be weighing on you, and you may be wondering how best to navigate them. And this emotionality could in some respects be slowing you down. There are things you would like to be doing, but you don't feel that you have the opportunity, or you're concerned about how other people are behaving. And it is true that it is possible to be over emotional, and it's also possible to be over negative. And some Leos may feel that things aren't going especially well. It's nothing specific, but you're feeling that things could move from bad to worse. That's how you feel. And it's not true that things are going to move from bad to worse, but you just have a rather negative attitude at the moment. And that just could be connected with the fact that you're feeling too much. You feel what other people feel, and maybe you're exaggerating. And you have to remember that emotions change, so you might accurately pick up on another person's feelings, but that's not the way this person necessarily is. It just may be the way they are right now, and in 10 minutes time things can change. So Leo, don't take your emotion too seriously. And if you reach any conclusions today, especially if they are bad conclusions, negative ones, then don't necessarily take them too seriously, especially as the moon is changing sign. The moon is moving out of Pisces, and that happens this afternoon if you're in the Americas. This evening, if you're in Europe or Africa, it will happen tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But when the moon moves out of Pisces and into Aries, I do think you're going to feel a whole lot better. And of course, when the moon moves into Aries, it'll be the run-up to the new moon. The moon has been waning for some time. Obviously, it wanes for 2 weeks approximately. And the new moon in Aries is a new chapter. It's a new opportunity, and that is something for you to be looking forward to. And even before the new moon, as the moon moves into Aries, you start to see possibilities, and you realize that things weren't actually as bad as you thought they were. And that applies to people as well. you thought people had a particular character, they had a particular attitude, and you see them in a different way. And so in actual fact, things are going to get better, even though subjectively you may feel that they're going to get worse. And yeah, this new moon, certainly for you, is a new beginning, and it's about you starting to see the world in a different and more expansive and optimistic way. And so that is coming up, and that is certainly something to be looking forward to. But over the course of the day, just take things easily, get used to this change of emphasis, and don't regard anything as being permanent, particularly the bad things. It might seem that there's absolutely no possibility of change, but that's because you're taking it all a bit too seriously. And ultimately, Leo, what you probably need is a change of scene. And if you're in the Americas this afternoon, you can probably find a change of scene for yourself when the moon moves into Aries. Go somewhere else. Talk to different people. Do something different. Read a different book if you're into reading, or have a different conversation. And so that's something that you're going to experience with the moon moving into Aries. So actually, Leo, things are looking good, even if it doesn't feel that way. Virgo, there continues to be a lot of stuff in Pisces. The day starts with the moon in Pisces. So with all this stuff going on in this sign, there is going to be a concentration on other people and their influence on you. And it's a continued concentration. And of course, it's been going on for some time. For, you could say, a month. But you could say much longer, because Saturn went into Pisces at the beginning of 2023. And since the beginning of 2023, there may have been certain social issues which you have been grappling with, and you may increasingly feel that it's all reaching a point where it can't go on any longer, because you understand it, you get people. And if you've been spending a long time with another person, you're starting to understand them for better or for worse. But it is slowly coming to an end. Saturn is not going to stay in Pisces forever. In a couple of months' time, Saturn will be in Aries. In fact, you've had Neptune in Pisces for a huge amount of time, since 2011, 2012. And at the end of a week, Neptune moves out of Pisces into Aries. And that does mean that the social dimension of things is maybe going to become less important. Or maybe it's just that you've understood the role of people in your life, and it's finally starting to make sense. But as far as today is concerned, the moon is making a conjunction to Venus and in Pisces, and moon conjunct Venus, and it's also conjunct Neptune. It's a very pleasant aspect, and it does mean that you know how to behave, and you know how to be nice to people, even if you don't necessarily feel very nice. And it may at times feel like an obligation or a bit of a chore, but Virgo, you're able to go through the motions, and you can get people onto your side, and you can say the right things. Though, as the day progresses, you can feel yourself becoming a little bit harsher, and I don't think you're going to be expressing this harshness, but you are starting to feel it. and you will appreciate some separation. And as Friday turns to Saturday, as you move into the weekend, I think you are going to value your privacy more, and you're perhaps going to want less to do with certain other people. They're taking up your time, they're emotionally draining, and so if you're making plans for the weekend, when the moon is not in Pisces anymore, when the moon is in Aries, then you need a weekend where you are in control, where you're the one calling the shots, and you don't want too much interruption, and also you want a weekend where you can think things through and feel things through as well. But as far as Friday is concerned, there just might be still some work to do connected with other people. Might be slightly annoying, but I think you can handle it. Libra. There is a conjunction between Moon and Saturn today. There's also a conjunction between the Moon and Venus. Ideally, you should be concentrating on the conjunction between the Moon and Venus. I mean, the Moon-Venus conjunction is pleasant, and Venus is your ruler, and Venus is in Pisces, so it's exalted in Pisces. So this means, Libra, that you can be a very pleasant person. At least you can come over as being a pleasant person. You know what to say, you know how to behave, and you understand the rules. There are rules of behavior in any social situation, and wherever you are, you'll know what to do, you'll know how to behave, and you're not going to rock the boat. But how does that really feel? Libra, you may be creating a split here between how you feel and what you're saying and how you're behaving. Yes, you can be nice, but at the same time, you're becoming a little bit rebellious. Your inner rebel is starting to knock on the door, and you look at things and you're not entirely happy with them, and you know for sure that things really could be better, and you may feel that other people, they are a bit of a pain. You know how to treat them well, but they could be becoming a little boring. And so ask yourself, what would you like to change? And how are you going to go about it? You know that you can't create change in a direct, over-the-top kind of way, because it wouldn't go down well, and you do have the sensitivity to understand what people can and cannot handle. But that change may be taking place in terms of your own world. You're not an entirely social animal, even though Libra has a reputation for being supposedly obsessed about its social life and other people. Libra, the balance, making sure you're not out of balance. But sometimes Libra has to change that balance. And if you want to change the balance, that change needs to take place to begin with on your own terms, in your own way, and it does not have to be announced. Now, one further complication about today is the fact that the moon is changing sign. So this afternoon, the moon moves into Aries, and, well, that's in the Americas. This evening, it will move into Aries if you're in Europe or Africa. It will move into Aries tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But with the moon moving into Aries, that does create a change. And on one hand, moon moving into Aries is about you being even more aware of other people and their influence on you and how they might be able to constrain you. On the other hand, the moon, when it moves into Aries, it does make a conjunction to Mercury. And this conjunction between the moon and Mercury may allow you finally to tell people how you feel. Not all people, but some people. It just could be that you find people who are actually sympathetic to your message, who are on your wavelength. And so perhaps you have to make some choices. Not everyone is sympathetic to your own desire for change, but as the moon moves into Aries, you do find support in certain quarters, and that's perhaps what you should be looking for, certainly by the end of the day, and or at least as you move into the weekend, because the moon is going to be in Aries throughout the weekend, and so moon in Aries may be about finding the right balance, finding people who are really sympathetic to your particular view of the world. Scorpio, there continues to be a big emphasis on the sign Pisces. In fact, in some ways, it's an emphasis that is just going to be getting stronger, because you already have Venus moving through Pisces, and in a couple of days, Mercury will be moving into Pisces as well. Although the moon is about to leave Pisces, it's about to move into Aries. So, in general, we're sort of at peak Pisces at the moment. We're approaching peak Pisces. And you as a Scorpio, you do need to make the most of it, because Pisces is a sign which you have a considerable amount of sympathy with. And it's a sign that allows you to be yourself and to appreciate what you can do and all the amazing things you can make happen on your terms. It really is on your terms. You don't have to consider anyone else's view in a broad sense, because your view is the right view, and if there's something you want to do, you're almost certainly right about it, and you shouldn't be trying to compromise or trying to listen too hard to what anyone else is saying, especially when it comes to artistic and creative matters. You are unique. You are a completely unique individual, and now is the time for that to be appreciated. And additionally, this square between Mars and Chiron, which I've been talking about over the last few days. I may have been getting a bit boring talking about this Mars square Chiron. This Mars square Chiron it's still there. It is separating, but it is a reminder that you need to do things your way. And it is the maverick spirit. And you need to tune into the maverick spirit, because you have something absolutely unique to contribute. Do you have to completely ignore other people and run roughshod over them? No, not at all. Venus is making a conjunction to Neptune. The moon actually is making a conjunction to Venus and Neptune, and that suggests to me that although you need to think about yourself and put your own creative interests first, you are at the same time able to be a very pleasant person. You can get on with lots of different people, and you understand them, and because you understand them, you're able to have an influence. And so if your particular approach doesn't feel especially popular, you might feel that you're at odds with the rest of the world. It doesn't have to be like that. You can show other people a different way of working, a different way of being, and you'll know how to deliver that message, and people will listen, and you can be persuasive, and people will be very receptive to your charms. And right now you do have a very real charm. It's a very individual charm, but it's something that people do appreciate. If there's anyone out there who doesn't appreciate your charm, well, that's nothing you have to worry about. You can't please everyone, but today you can please the people who matter. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, the moon eventually moves into Aries, and I think that is a good thing. There's rather too much emphasis on Pisces at the moment. We've got a lot of planets in Pisces. I've been talking about all these Pisces planets, and I have suggested that with this Pisces emphasis, you should maybe have been sticking to one place, been concentrating on your security, your home and your family, but all of that gets a little bit boring. And with the moon moving out of Pisces into Aries, into a fire sign, that does create more action, more energy, more excitement. And this sign change this afternoon if you're in the Americas, this evening if you're in Africa or Europe, tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But this sign change is elevating. It makes you become aware of new possibilities, and also you lose some of your negativity. Sagittarius can have a negative streak, and it's not always happy and optimistic. And I know it's supposed to be ruled by Jupiter, but sometimes Sagittarians, when things aren't entirely going their way, they can get rather down. And moon moving into Aries, where it makes a conjunction to Mercury, does give you a boost and allows you to become aware of new possibilities. Also, we have a run up to the new moon, because over the weekend there is a new moon, and this new moon is in Aries, and it represents a new cycle for you, a new creative cycle, a new cycle where you start to become aware of what is possible, where you start to be able to move away from a fixed set of boundaries and start to be able to explore. And so that's what you start to feel as the moon moves into Aries. And also when the moon moves into Aries, because it makes that conjunction to Mercury, that does make you an easier person to have around. You find it easier to communicate, and you probably will come over as more friendly, more interesting. I mean, you're always interesting, but you can be more interesting than usual and more exciting than usual. So there is a bit of a change coming up, but still there are a lot of planets in Pisces. So whatever you plan on doing, you're not going to make any mistakes. You're not going to take things too far. You will know your limits, but maybe when you look at those limits, you can just take them a little bit further. And you can also do that with the help of certain other people, because as the day progresses, as you move into the weekend, you do become more popular. Capricorn. We're starting the run-up to a new moon. So we've got a new moon over the weekend, a new moon in Aries, and this new moon may be about you, Capricorn, rededicating yourself to something which is really very fundamental to you. And as you move into the weekend, you may feel that that you are tying up loose ends, that you've said whatever you had to say. You've tried to be positive. You've given everything you've got, and there's nothing more to be done. And your idea about this weekend is a weekend, but it's all about you, and it's about your priorities. And you can feel this weekend coming up as the moon moves into Aries. So the moon moves into Aries this afternoon if you're in the Americas, a bit later if you're in Europe or Africa. But eventually, moon gets into Aries, and you do want to slow down, and you want to distance yourself from some of the commitments you might have made earlier in the week, and you will value your independence as the day progresses, as you do move into the weekend. So it's not a good time to be taking on new commitments, or to telling people that you're going to do something, or to say, well, wait until next week. I'm sure you can be there for someone next week, because it's a change. You don't really know how you're going to feel over the weekend. The moon is waning. You're saying goodbye to things. There's also a sort of seasonal aspect to it, isn't it? That one season is coming to an end, another season is just getting going. Where I'm here, the temperature is going up. I know it's March in Washington State. It felt boiling yesterday, and it is a reminder that things are changing, and you don't want to be stuck in the old season. You don't want to be stuck with the old commitments, and you've got to make fresh plans. So if you want to make fresh plans, then you've got to distance yourself from the past. And additionally, you might have to reconsider the conventions of the past, even the rules. When you look at your freedom and what you're able to do and what you're not able to do, it may really occur to you that what is holding you back is the set of laws in which you are working under or functioning under. So laws can have, many dimensions. That could be the law of the land, or the law of your city, or your county if you're in the Americas. But everywhere has their laws, but it's not just written laws in the code book. It's also about conventions. Other people have their conventions, families have their conventions, companies, institutions have their conventions, and you are working under those conventions. And I think many Capricorns may feel that those laws and conventions aren't working well for them. And you have to then ask yourself, well, what are you going to do about it? What you could do about it is move to a different jurisdiction, or you can move to a different place, different group of people with a different set of conventions. That is one way of doing it. Alternatively, you might decide that the best approach is to change those rules, laws, conventions. There is a way, but you haven't quite worked it out at the moment. And maybe as you move into the weekend, as you try to distance yourself from it all, in a way, what you want to do symbolically is separate yourself from the system, so that you are completely independent, so that you are living in your own jurisdiction, where you're the one setting the rules. And Capricorn, as a sign, you do understand the rules, and you understand the importance of the rules. And you understand how burdensome rules can be. So that really should be how you function, how you should be thinking about functioning, and just asking yourself, what is holding you back and what you can do about it. But in the process, you don't have to cut yourself from everyone. You don't have to cut yourself off from everyone. There is a conjunction between Venus and Neptune today. In fact, there's a conjunction. There's lots of lunar conjunctions. The Moon is making a conjunction to Saturn. Moon makes a conjunction to Venus, makes a conjunction to Neptune. Then the Moon changes sign, and it makes a conjunction to Mercury. So the Moon is making lots of different aspects, and those lunar aspects may track the behavior of another person, and there may be one particular person, or maybe several people, who are doing lots of different things and are active, and they want to play an active part in your life. And I think it's okay for them to play an active part of your life, provided they're on your wavelength. Maybe they're a member of your family or someone you know very well. And if they're on your wavelength, that's fine. But what you don't want is people you don't know, strangers, particularly people who are acting according to a set of conventions that you don't appreciate. You don't want that kind of person interfering in your life. So overall, Capricorn, as you move into the weekend, you should try to be as independent as possible. Aquarius, you may feel a little bit of disillusionment. You wanted things to happen in a particular way, and you feel that there is a certain lack of appreciation, that people are not fully on your wavelength and they don't completely understand you, and also they may have the wrong priorities, and they may, for example, be obsessed about trivia, especially material trivia, small things which really no one should have to worry about, but they are worrying about it, and that could be irritating, and you can't really get away from it because in your own way you're quite sensitive to other people's needs and demands, and that's nice. But what you're picking up on is people who aren't really doing anything useful. They're not worrying about anything useful. And because of that, you may be of a view that you need to kind of separate yourself. Having the wrong people around you just could be a problem, and it works both ways. Certain people might find you difficult to deal with, and perhaps it's just a question of accepting that situation. Though there should be an improvement over the course of the day, and this is when the Moon leaves Pisces and moves into and enters Aries. So as the Moon moves into Aries, things are more dynamic, and it's about the Moon moving into a fire sign. You need a bit of fire. You've already got the Sun and Mercury in Aries, but having a Moon in Aries as well, that just gives you that energy and that excitement and that ability to sort of look beyond your immediate environment, to be able to consider something different. And it might then be a case that you feel that the best way of dealing with the whole issue is to go somewhere else. So if you're not happy in one place, you can be happy in another place. So where do you want to go to? And it doesn't mean that you have to take a huge journey. It may just be moving from one room to another, or it just could be moving from one social scene to another social scene, or visiting someone, just making some change. And a small change can make all the difference. So just because you feel constrained and your freedom of action is limited, you shouldn't regard that as being permanent. It can just be something very temporary. And I do think that when the moon moves into Aries, there will be an improvement. And of course, the moon is in Aries, throughout the weekend. Indeed, over the weekend, there is a new moon in Aries. And I'll be talking about this new moon in Aries in detail when I do my video, when I look at my forecast for the weekend. But, with the moon in Aries, you may realize that you're happier in one place than another place. And, when you look back at what was happening over this weekend, you'll realize that you did make a change. You decided that certain people, a certain atmosphere had really had its day. You made the change and it did make a big difference. So over the next couple of days, do be prepared for some kind of shift. It's not a dramatic shift, it's quite a subtle shift, but it's a shift that could make you feel a whole lot better. Pisces. Pisces, still a lot of stuff going on in your sign. You've got 4 planets in Pisces, at least for the first part of the day, because we've got Saturn, Moon, Venus, Neptune in Pisces, and we've also got the North Node in Pisces. So that does put a lot of emphasis on you. You are at the center of things, and you're someone that can make things happen. And additionally, Pisces, you're just aware of what's going on, and you understand it all. And additionally, you have a sense of perspective. You can see where things are going, and you're not going to take anything too seriously. There may be restrictions, for example, that you are somewhat aware of, and other people seem to be very aware of them, and they may be complaining about it. Well, we can't do A, B, and C, because if we were to do that, we might be upsetting someone or breaking some rule or so on, and that could upset certain people, but not you. You're able to look beyond restrictions, and you're going to be very good at finding ways of working around things, and that relates to the general Piscean flexibility, being able to just be like a fish, following the tide, working your way through, just following gravity. If you just follow gravity, you'll always, well, if it's water, you'll always get to the sea, won't you, or something like that. You'll always find a way of moving. So, that does look really good, and at the same time, you're going to find that your ability to deal with other people is going to be really good, because there is a conjunction between the Moon, Venus, and Neptune today, and that makes you incredibly sensitive, and sensitive in a good way. It's not in a way that you're going to be overwhelmed. You're going to be able to understand people. You'll understand what makes them tick. You'll understand what upsets them, and you'll understand what to say. And if anyone is feeling down, there's a very good chance that you'll be able to cheer them up. Now, the moon does change sign today. Okay, it could be tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. And with that sign change, with the moon moving into Aries, it does create a change of emphasis. There may be a financial issue that suddenly becomes important. It's something to do with money, or who owns what. And if that kind of thing happens, then probably the best approach is to be dynamic about it, because what you don't want is money issues to be lingering and things aren't spoken, people are too embarrassed to say anything. And Moon in Aries is dynamic. It's about taking action, and Moon is not just in Aries, it's making a conjunction to Mercury. So if there's something of a financial nature that is unsaid, but still is spoiling the atmosphere, then Pisces, it may be down to you to just be open and honest about it. And what seemed to be an intractable problem could be solved pretty quickly. Also remember that over the weekend there is a new moon in Aries, and from a Piscean perspective, this new moon in Aries could have financial implications, but I'll be talking about that in my next video. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and I now want to look at Friday from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I threw the coins, and the question I had in mind is, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first and only hexagram I got was hexagram 46. 46, pushing upward. It's a hexagram about just making progress. So over today, Friday, you can make good progress. Whatever you're doing, you don't have to be in a hurry, and you just keep moving, and you are perhaps realizing that in the past you had been in a hurry, and it might not have worked out. And when you've got a hexagram which is locked, because there are no moving lines, then it can be a good idea to look at the nuclear hexagram, the hexagram in the middle. And the nuclear hexagram is hexagram 54, which is the marrying maiden. So pushing forward is about progress, slow progress in general, but consistent progress. But marrying maiden is about being in a hurry, wanting results, the symbol of a young woman being in a hurry to get married. That's what it means, but it's not appropriate. And with pushing upwards, just be satisfied with solid results. And it is a locked hexagram, and so when you've got a locked hexagram, that is often an indication, regardless of what the hexagram is, that not a great deal is happening. And this might be reminding us that over the weekend we have a new moon. The moon is waning, and this is really the end of the lunar cycle. It's not going anywhere. We should be tying things up now and not starting anything new. So pushing upward may be about just finishing things off. We've maybe got one last detail to sort out, and we can sort it out, and then it's done. And really, that's all there is to say. And now I want to look at the astrology. Now, I did say that I wanted to look at the signal crisis and this leak that happened, with this planning for this attack on the Houthis being released on Signal. And this is a big embarrassment to the Trump regime. But first of all, I just wanted to say something about Neptune very quickly that I missed out on because yesterday I talked about Neptune, and Neptune is moving into Aries. And I wanted to make a very simple point about the difference between Neptune in Pisces and Neptune in Aries. And it's one very simply of rulership. And So here is the chart, by the way, of Neptune moving into Aries. So it happens on, when does it happen? It happens on Sunday. So when Neptune was in Pisces, it's ruled by Jupiter. And, Neptune doesn't rule any signs. It has an association with Pisces, but it is a discovered planet. It's not part of the traditional scheme. And so I was thinking about Neptune in Pisces and what it means for it to be in a Jupiter-ruled sign. And Jupiter is quite a moralistic sign. It is about the right way of doing things, the wrong way of doing things. People having definite views about what is right and what is wrong, and being pretty judgmental about it. And I was thinking about Neptune in Pisces and how it actually related to cancel culture. So people get cancelled for having wrong opinions. Or you think about, J.K. Rowling, for example, the Harry Potter author, the way she has attracted the ire of certain members of the transgender community, and we get people being cancelled left, right, and centre. And this moralism, it is immoral to look at history in a particular way. People are accused of being, a fascist or a racist or being transphobic or phobic of something else, and so forth. And that seems to be very much part of Neptune in Pisces. And I do think that it is the fact that Jupiter rules Pisces. Now, there's nothing wrong with being moral. I mean, there is a place for morality. There is a place for judging people. But maybe with Neptune in Pisces, it has gone too far. And at a certain stage, it has to transform into something else. So when Neptune moves into Aries, Neptune is no longer in a Jupiter-ruled sign. It moves into a Mars-ruled sign. So you could say that Neptune moving from Pisces to Aries is about a transition from Jupiter to Mars. And Mars is a planet which is assertive. It is a planet of war. And we have to attack. And as I think I suggested, in many cases, the people who are successful are going to be the ones who are able to stand up for themselves. And that can be going to war. I mean, you think about the Civil War, the American Civil War. You could say that it started just as Neptune was moving from Pisces to Aries. So Neptune in Pisces was the feeling that something was wrong. And in this case, something really was wrong and genuinely wrong, that slavery was in existence in the United States, and it was tolerated. Clearly that was wrong, and you can moralize about it and you can theorize about it, but at a certain stage, Neptune moving from Pisces to Aries, you go to war. And that's what happened with Neptune moving from a Jupiter-ruled sign to a Mars-ruled sign. I think in this case, in terms of what's happening right now, it's different. I don't think people are going to go to war over all of these things that upset them. Moralism is not necessarily going to turn into war. I think it's going to be a different world where people need to stand up for themselves if they want to be successful. And I'm afraid, I had a brief discussion in the comments that with Neptune moving into Aries, there is going to be something, unfortunately, maybe rather Darwinist about it. It could be the survival of the fittest, especially in terms of international relations. Countries that believe in themselves and are able to stand up for themselves, and perhaps the ones who are actually prepared to go to war, are the ones that are going to win out. And as I said, I do think we're going to see some changes going on in international relations. So now I want to look at one country in particular, and that is the United States. And we have had this signal scandal. And I wanted to just start by looking at the United States' chart, just a reminder, what is happening in the United States? What are the big transits we should be looking out for? And Neptune is moving into Aries. And if we take the USA chart for July the 4th, 1776 at 5:10 p.m., then that means that Neptune is about to go into the United States' fourth house. So over the next couple of months, it will go back and forth through. Well, Neptune will go direct. I think Neptune doesn't go retrograde until October. So we've got Neptune moving across the IC. And so that Neptune moving across the IC for the United States is going to be quite sort of disconcerting. The last time Neptune went across the United States' IC was during the Civil War. And that does undermine the foundations of the country. But in the Civil War, but the country, was at war. And we're not going to have a war like that, obviously. And in the Civil War, there were it wasn't just Neptune was moving through Aries, but you also had Uranus moving into Gemini. And so Neptune moving into Aries, and later in the year, Uranus starts to edge into Gemini. So you had those two outer planet configurations happening, where Uranus and Neptune roughly in sextile to one another. You had that during the Civil War, and you've got it again. So there are Civil War vibes coming up, and that's that's perhaps how we should see what is going on. I know people have said that the United States is going to degenerate into a civil war. Of course, the United States is not going to have a civil war. The Civil War was something regional. You can't have some regional split in the US. That is impossible. When you think that every state, however, if it's a very Democrat state, there'll still be 40% of the people will still vote Republican. And if it's a Republican state, you're still going to get around 40% of the people are going to vote Democrat. So the differences are at a state level as well as a national level. So you can't really think about the country dividing up. That's just impossible. I know there's talk, people in Western Washington that want to become part of Canada, but it's just not going to happen. It's still, how do you deal with a civil war which is taking place on sort of a cultural and a social level? And Neptune, Aries, Uranus moving into Gemini, and of course Uranus, when it moves into Gemini, will start to move towards the descendant, and when Uranus hits the descendant, historically, that is when the United States goes to war. And talking about war vibes, Jupiter was recently on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. Jupiter is still pretty close to the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and that possibly coincided with Trump firing off those missiles against the Houthis. I think the question is, what actually was the United States trying to achieve by firing those missiles at the Houthis? Additionally, we shouldn't forget that Uranus is slowly moving towards America's moon. Uranus in Taurus is moving towards America's moon. You had Uranus hitting the moon at around the time of sort of Pearl Harbor and the beginning of the Second World War, sort of a Uranus cycle ago, when Uranus was in late Taurus at the beginning of the Second World War. So that was something that's something we should be thinking about. So there are kind of war vibes in America. Civil War particularly, but it's just going to be interesting to see how does a civil war manifest? How does it actually work out? And that is going to be the United States' challenge. And you have to remember also that if a country is going to succeed with Neptune moving into Aries, it has to be united. The Civil War, you could argue, was the making of America, because after the Civil War, it became, in a way, a united country. At least on a political, at least in a military and political sense, and one side beat the other, and that is very important. And there has to be some kind of unification, whether it's a forced unification or not. Well, that doesn't matter. Neptune and Aries. You could say Neptune and Aries was a forced reunification of America, the United States, and it was also the forced unification of Germany. So you had two things roughly happening at the same time. And then we have these leaks. The signal conversation, where what was his name? Tim. I think it was Tim. Michael Waltz. When Michael Waltz was leading his conversation, he initiated this conversation. I think that Michael Waltz is the National Security Advisor, and here's a chart for when the conversation started. I've called it signal leak, but it's just when it started. I think it was at 4:28 p.m. on March the 11th when the signal group was brought together. And at the time of this conversation, when it started, and it lasted for a few days, the moon was starting to was making a square to Uranus. It was a pretty close square to Uranus. Okay, it was separating actually, but this is perhaps a reminder that you maybe shouldn't be starting things with moon square Uranus. That could be a little bit difficult and unpredictable, and the unpredictability, we certainly saw that with Jeffrey Goldberg included in this conversation, who was editor-in-chief at The Atlantic. And so, yeah, they were asking for trouble there. And look at Mercury and Venus. There was a Mercury-Venus conjunction, and this Mercury-Venus conjunction was exactly semi-square Uranus, and that Uranus was in the 10th house. So this was potentially a bad time to be starting this kind of event. I would be particularly thinking about the moon making that square to Uranus. That is troublesome, and maybe they should have waited for the moon to have gone into Virgo. So this leak, it did have an impact, and it had an impact on Trump, and it had. He's the guy in charge. He's the head of state. He's not just an individual now that he's president. So Trump has been undermined to some extent. I think that this leak thing has been blown up out of all proportion by Trump's enemies. Of course, there is a view that this leak was deliberately created by nefarious forces. I'm not quite sure how that works, but here is Donald Trump's horoscope, and then if we compare Trump's chart with the disclosure, I haven't gone for the leak itself, but I've gone for the moment it was disclosed. Uranus was at 24:26. Was it 24:26 Taurus? So Trump has at the moment, as we speak, he has Uranus exactly on his midheaven, and so we could see that as things happening. He wants to do things. He's trying to put forward his program, but maybe his enemies are trying to frustrate him, are trying to undermine him, and so this is what has happened. And Uranus on the midheaven just represents things happening to his government, and it is a bit of an embarrassment, but we don't necessarily want to exaggerate. Now, Trump has has in his chart his Mercury at 8 degrees 52 Cancer. So Uranus was making a square, but Uranus was making a semi-square to his Mercury. So in his natal chart, Trump has Mercury semi-square Uranus, and that really says a lot about him. He's someone who says what's on his mind. He doesn't hold back. Sometimes he gets himself into trouble, or appears to get himself into trouble through what he says. Now, this signal conversation, even though Trump had nothing to do with it, he wasn't part of it, it still happened on his watch. He was president, and it was a Mercury event. So it's maybe not surprising that while Mercury is on his midheaven, while Mercury is while Uranus is semi-square his Mercury, we have this kind of mercurial event. And going back to when the conversation started, this Mercury, we had a Mercury conjunction, Mercury-Venus conjunction at 850 something Aries. So going back to Trump's chart, that Mercury-Venus conjunction, which started the conversation, was exactly square Trump's Mercury, and it was also making that Mercury-Uranus conjunction was semi-square his midheaven. So it was really hitting quite a sensitive part of his horoscope. But I'm not convinced that this signal leak is quite the big deal that people are making it out to be. But I think it does show up in his chart, and this issue he has with Uranus on his midheaven surprises things. People maybe trying to undermine him is going to continue, because Uranus, it stays here for some time, and as we know, Uranus is going to soon make a square to America's moon. So it all ties in, and we just shouldn't forget that Trump's inauguration is kind of blighted by this Mars on the IC, and we mustn't forget that. Trump's inauguration is not as bad as the horoscope of Biden's inauguration, but still, Mars on the IC is difficult, and it does indicate conflict. And as I pointed out, Uranus is moving into Gemini, Neptune is moving into Aries, and so we're seeing a repeated cycle, because there are links between what was going on astrologically at the time of the Civil War with Neptune in Aries, Uranus in Gemini. We're seeing the same thing. So that is the question I really have. How is this civil war going to manifest? It's not going to be about armies, but it's going to be about something else. And this is the question we have to ask ourselves. Anyway, those are a few disconnected thoughts about Trump and the US, and I hope you found that of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.